So I'm at a point in my YouTube journey where I no longer need to script my videos out. I usually don't even have bullet points because I just go off the dome. I just let the flow of consciousness move through me in the most spontaneous way possible, and that's how I'm able to make the most organic content possible. With that being said, I want to make this video with these bullet points in mind because I'm touching on some very, very specific aspects of myself that genuinely need to be addressed. Now, first of all, before I even get into these aspects that I'm talking about, I want to say this: success is subjective. There is an objective dictionary definition of success, but the way that people perceive the word success is generally very, very subjective. To some people, having a wife and 2 kids and a home in the suburbs is successful. For other people, they don't want a family, but they want a mansion in the hills, and that's their idea of success. For other people, they just want as much freedom as they can possibly get, and that's their idea of successful. I'm still trying to figure out what my idea of successful is, but one thing that I do know is that no matter what my idea of success is, if I don't address and work on these character flaws, I will never reach it. Plain and simple. Now, the irony is that true success, at least in my opinion, is only to be found in the present moment, right? So generally speaking, the only thing that can prevent somebody from being successful is their inability to be present. Because somebody could achieve their subjective criteria of what success actually is to them, but if they're not present, they're not actually experiencing it, therefore they're not successful. They're still in a scarce state of mind. But I'm going on a tangent. Basically, these are my personal character flaws that are preventing me and have prevented me from fulfilling my fullest potential. And what I want you guys to do is I want you to comment down below what your 5 biggest character flaws are. What are the aspects of yourself that are preventing you from getting to where you want to go? For me, my number 1 biggest character flaw is impatience. Impatience. This is something that I've struggled with for practically the entirety of my life. Impatience. I've always wanted it now. Instant gratification. Instant gratification. My addiction to instant gratification, or my expectation of instant gratification, especially as it pertains to my work life and the monetary metrics of success, has really been a hindrance to me in a lot of different ways. For example, for me to go out and not just get, but lease a BMW. And I know I've beaten this topic to death and I have forgiven myself for this, but it's important to reflect on these moments, because when you reflect on not just the moment itself, but how you felt in that moment, that's where you're able to transform and transcend that state of being that puts you in that situation. So for me to go to the BMW dealership, knowing that I was making maybe $4,000 or $5,000 a month at most, before taxes were deducted, by the way, making $4,000 or $5,000 a month, and getting a 2022 BMW, leasing it, so I'm not building any equity in the car, and paying $718.94 per month for that car, knowing that I did not have the money for it. What trait could have possibly inspired me to make that decision that day? In fact, I actually got declined for the car. My dad had to co-sign for the car for the lease term because I didn't have enough credit history. Or really, it was probably because my income was too low, but what they told me was that I didn't have enough credit history. Either way, I should have taken that as a sign that I wasn't ready. If I was getting declined for the car, I probably wasn't in a position to be getting it. If you can't buy the car cash, you probably shouldn't lease it, especially a luxury car at that, especially a brand new luxury car at that. Nevertheless, the reason why I made that decision that day, and if I keep looking around, it's because I'm out here in beautiful Santa Monica, California. You guys already know, we're out here just speaking our truths, man, just really doing some self-inventory out here on the beach. But for me to have made that decision, the level of impatience that I must have been feeling in that exact moment, or really in the months leading up to that moment, must have been astronomical. Absolutely astronomical. And that impatience was what enabled me to make such a financially catastrophic decision, which ultimately put me in a position where I'm, I guess you could say, behind from the standpoint of conventional monetary metrics. I'm now behind where I was when I got the car. Had I played my cards right and just kept the car that I had, I could have taken that money, invested it in maybe an index fund, crypto, who knows, or even just kept it in my savings and built up the interest, and I would have been able to stack my money much quicker, right? I would probably have, this is just a rough estimate, but I'd probably have somewhere around 50 or 60,000 in the bank right now, right? But instead, I'm basically, I don't want to say I'm struggling to stay afloat because I have money coming in and now I'm living well below my means, but now I'm having to make up for lost time, right? And that to me is the biggest possible tragedy of this whole situation, of any situation really, is having to make up for lost time. It's not about the money can come back, but the time that I could have spent stacking that money up is time that I can't get back. And so now I have to essentially work overtime or live out of my car, make all of these extra sacrifices because I made a terrible decision out of sheer impatience. I was young, I was apt to comparing myself to other people who were in positions that I saw as admirable, not knowing that maybe they started when they were way younger than me, or maybe they were living above their means and they were just putting on a facade of having it like that. I don't know. I don't know the ins and outs of people's lives, but what I do know is that impatience has definitely been my biggest hindrance as far as not just my YouTube journey, but my life journey. Now, the next biggest character flaw that I've struggled with is pride. Pride, man. And when I say pride, there's different types of pride. I'm the type of person who has to do everything on my own. Everything on my own. Now, some of this is justifiable in my opinion, in the sense that I do believe that being self-reliant and self-sufficient is very liberating. It's a very liberating trait to have, especially when you're a young adult. I'm 22 going on 23. I just moved to a completely different state across the country. I need self-sufficiency. I need to be able to take care of myself. And I know that for as much as my parents want to be there for me, they can't really be there for me in the same way because of the distance, the sheer distance between us. Now I'm responsible for taking care of myself. And like I said, I do believe that that can be a very positive trait, but at the same time, I feel like there are times when maybe, for example, building out a team around me could help me really expedite my process of growth and maybe even help me compensate for some of the mistakes that I've made in the past out of impatience, right? So being too prideful to not just ask for help, but to accept help when it's offered to me. That's something that I've been actively trying to work on, and I'm not perfect. I don't know if I'll ever be perfect. As a matter of fact, I know I'll never be perfect, but I'm definitely trying to get better about just asking for help when I need it. And that's not just in the form of financial assistance, because I know that I can generate income at my own discretion. It's more about asking for help as far as my psychological health, my mental health, my spiritual health goes. Because I have a tendency, this is something that I've realized recently, especially now that I live out here pretty much on my own, I have a tendency to really confide in solitude, in seclusion, whenever I'm down, right? And one thing that I've been doing to help alleviate this proclivity for just solitude, for locking myself away from the whole entirety of the world, is making these videos, being as vulnerable as I can, returning to that level of transparency in my content that got me to where I am in the first place. Because the reason why I ever really started YouTube was because I needed a platform where I could speak my truth. Because me trying to keep everything to myself was eating me alive on the inside. But now I'm in a position where I have a platform, so I know that by me putting myself out there, I can not only alleviate my own stresses, but help other people alleviate theirs by letting them know that they're not alone. So that's something that I've been doing to actively work on my pride, my inability to ask for and or receive help. I also did therapy for a good portion of last year. And I also have now self-published 2 books, which are pretty much all of my deepest, darkest traumas, all in 2 books. And I'm working on my 3rd book right now. So that's something that I've been actively doing to overcome the pride that has prevented me from building out that team or from seeking or receiving that help. Now, the next thing that I've struggled with is indecisiveness. Indecisiveness has been a major, substantial hindrance to me on my journey. And the reason why is because when you're indecisive, you'll never make that much progress in any specific direction. I hope you guys can hear me. There's a lot of planes and helicopters flying overhead, but when you're indecisive, you never really make significant or notable progress in any one direction, right? And there have definitely been times where I thought about quitting YouTube altogether to focus on writing, and then I wake up the next day and I'm like, no, I think I want to go ahead and focus on YouTube and put writing on the back burner. Sometimes I think that I should do both. Sometimes I think I should do drop shipping. Sometimes I just think about all of these different things that have nothing to do with the path that I'm on. And I realize now that because of my indecisiveness, I'm very easily swayed. And this is a part of the reason why I had to stop reading comments. If you guys wonder why I don't read comments anymore, I had to stop reading comments because a man who stands for nothing will fall for anything. And I'm well aware of this, and I know that I have to figure out my general life principles, not just in terms of my work life, but in terms of my life my life off camera. Because when I turn this camera on, at most I'm documenting what, 10 to 20 minutes out of my day. There's still another 23 hours and 50 minutes to account for, right? And that's the life that I have to deal with, or really that I get to deal with. But you get what I'm trying to say. I need to figure out what I truly want out of life so that I can commit to it. And this is something that I've struggled with, not just in terms of my work, but like I said, in all aspects of life. Fitness, for example. I could have a much better physique right now, or be able to do much more than I'm able to do, be able to lift much more weight than I'm able to lift, had I just committed to a system from the get-go. But instead, I've swayed back and forth. One day I want to be a calisthenics expert, the next day I want to be a power lifter, then a bodybuilder. And when you're constantly switching up your goal, you're switching up your route as well, right? Imagine if you're driving a car and you're constantly changing the destination, you're never going to get anywhere. You're just going to drive in circles and burn all your gasoline while you're at it. And with these gas prices out here, that's not something you want to do. So that's definitely something that I need to work on, is just being more intentional. I want to say it was in Think and Grow Rich, could be wrong about that, but one of these self-help books, the author said that successful people are generally very quick to make up their mind and very slow to change it. And that's something that I need to take note of and implement in my own psyche. Now, the next thing that I need to work on, if I want to get to where I want to go in life, once I make up my mind about where I want to go in life, is my victim complex. I need to transcend my victim complex. Now, if you guys read Ego Death, which was my latest book release, you'll see certain poems in there pertaining to this victim complex. I realize now that a big part of the reason why I have a victim complex, and I'm sure that a lot of young African American men can relate to this, but the reason why I have this victim complex is because that's what's sold to us. Now, I guess in a sense, me saying that is the victim complex at work, because ultimately it's up to me to determine which beliefs I'm going to buy into. But I realized that from a very young age, the content that I consumed, especially the rap videos and just black culture in general, taught me how to be the best possible victim. The best possible victim. And over time, that transcended just the culture itself and started to go into mainstream media with some of the news that you see about these killings and whatnot. And I'm not saying that these things aren't happening or that they're right in any way, shape, or form, but generally speaking, in my experience, I've never had a bad experience with police. Have I been subject to racial profiling? Maybe I have, maybe I haven't, I don't know. But ultimately, I've never been pulled over. Generally, when I run across a policeman, they're very cool to me, and I'm very nice to them. and those interactions go exactly how they should. And it's not just in the sense of my interactions with police, because those are few and far in between, believe me when I tell you that, but just everything in general. Just the way that I carry myself, my subconscious demeanor, and my approach, my disposition in life in general. I see myself as a victim, and because of this, I feel like I have something to prove. I feel like I have this chip on my shoulder, and I need to show everybody that I am somebody. And I've always been somebody, and I'll always be somebody. That's why I'm here. But I think that this victim complex is what has led to my impatience, in a sense. Me feeling the need to go out and get that BMW just to show people that, hey, I'm a young, successful black man. Blasian, actually, but most people, when they see me, they think that I'm black. So I'm a young, successful black man driving a BMW, and I'm wearing these clothes, and because of all of these material objects, I'm somebody. And when you lay it out like that, it's ridiculous. It sounds ridiculous, but I challenge all young black men, or really all young men in general, all young people, everybody. I challenge everybody watching this to really question yourselves in terms of how you may put yourself in the victim complex. Because one thing that I've realized is that a lot of people, they live their lives in terms of duality. So for every victim, there's a victimizer. And a lot of times people will categorize themselves in terms of this duality, through the lens of this duality, this polarity. And so they see themselves as either a victim or a victimizer. I think a really, really good example of this is the red pill community. The red pill community, the black pill community, all of these communities that talk about women, or even on the other side, you could talk about the feminist movement. I'm not going to get too much into that, but these communities in general, which tend to be very divisive in nature, if you guys haven't noticed, they are solely contingent on people's belief in victimization, that they can be a victim of somebody else. But you have to understand that the victim complex is probably the single most detrimental complex that you can possibly contain in your psyche, especially if you want to be successful. Because to be successful, you have to take accountability. But the victim complex is you diverting the accountability to somebody else. So it's literally you taking your power right here in your hand and just throwing it away into the ocean, just like that, right? And just letting the waves wash it away for somebody else to handle it, to handle your responsibilities for you. And as I sit here and I reflect on this, it's kind of ironic that I would have a victim complex and be prideful at the same time. Because how is it possible that I can be a victim on one hand, but be completely self-sufficient on the other hand? And what I'm realizing now, a connection that I literally just made as I'm filming this video, is that the two go hand in hand. Me being prideful and being overly self-sufficient, overly self-reliant, and shutting myself off from the rest of the world is actually me fulfilling the victim prophecy, right? Me believing that I'm a victim and having to perpetuate that. Because one thing that I've realized in life is that our number one desire is to uphold the way that we perceive ourselves. And oftentimes we'll distort not only our self-perceptions, but our perceptions of the world around us in order to uphold this self-perception of being a victim or a victimizer. So that's definitely something that I'm looking to consciously work through, and just being able to reach a point where I no longer see myself as a victim, but I understand instead that I have the power to create my reality, and I'm doing that every single day, whether I am doing it consciously or not. And I think another part of this victim complex was built with my experiences with Hurricane Katrina. I realize now that even though from what I remember it didn't seem like it impacted me or affected me that much, being 5 years old and seeing how people treat you when you've been through this type of tragedy, but like I said, when you're that young, you don't understand what you're even going through. But seeing how the teachers and the other students treat you when you walk into the new school, and they hear where you're from and they hear what you've been through, and they give you that teddy bear and things like that, they give you school supplies, that patronization. And I'm not saying that all of this was coming from a bad place. I appreciate the hospitality from them, but at the same time, I think that having already had the seed of victimization within me from the content that I'd consumed, all this did was solidify it. My experiences with Hurricane Katrina solidified this victim complex and kind of expedited the growth of that victim complex. And that's what I'm slowly but surely unraveling day by day as I work on this third book. Now, the last thing that I need to work on, and I'm sure there are other things that I'm forgetting to list, but the last thing that I'm aware of that I need to work on is insecurity. Insecurity in general, and you could argue that insecurity pretty much underlines all of these different traits. Insecurity is kind of the thread that holds these traits together. And insecurity is what makes me indecisive. It's what allows me to buy into the victim complex. It's what forces me to make decisions out of impatience and scarcity. Being insecure, I do believe, is somewhat of a natural part of life, and I think that it's a mechanism that we have that inspires us to evolve. I think that from a biological standpoint, we almost need insecurity, but from a spiritual standpoint, it serves no purpose at all. Okay, my camera just died. I honestly forgot what I was even talking about, but I will say this: insecurity is, generally speaking, contingent on comparison. Insecurity is contingent on comparison, right? So for you to compare yourselves to other people, you are putting yourself in a position where you basically make insecurity an inevitability of your psyche, because you'll never be like other people. This is something that I realized when I was watching a live stream from Ice Cold JT a while back. It was a collab stream with Ice Cold JT and Cole Hastings, who are two other content creators who are, you could say, in the same space that I'm in, at least at the time anyways, the self-development space. And Ice Cold JT said something that absolutely fucked my head up, tripped me out completely. He said that he's jealous of me and Cole Hastings because our content is so professional. And it tripped me out because I often found myself feeling envious or jealous of Ice Cold JT because his content was so free and so liberating, entertaining. And that's when I realized, in that exact moment, I realized that it's all about perspective. It's all perspective. And if you compare yourself to somebody else, you'll always fall short. You will always fall short if you compare yourselves to other people, because you'll never be them. You didn't come here to be them. You came here to be you. So by learning to embrace who you came here to be, you transcend your insecurity. And ironically, that's when you evolve the most. Not only do you evolve, but you evolve in the direction that you're meant to evolve in to uphold the evolution of the universe at large.